Hi, it's Carlos, your MTI guy. I'm here with Randy Chapman of Logitech. Hi, Randy. Good
Hi,
to see
how you doing? Yeah.
Very good, very good. I'm really happy I managed to finally get onto your stand because, let's be honest, this has kind of been the talking point of the show, right? And when it comes to Logitech and then any other UC company. So for those of you that aren't aware, Logitech are at ISE 2025, and one of their big standout launches for this year's show, actually launched slightly before the show, but one of the big launches that they're really showcasing is the Rally Board 65. I was going to check just in case.
Yeah.
So Rally Board 65, which is a phenomenal looking piece of equipment to start with. But Randy, tell us more about this, because it's got a couple of party tricks, hasn't it? And it's a really well integrated piece of equipment with some really good thought in terms of the design and functionality.
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of vendors that do touchscreens. You could buy a touchscreen, you could put a Rally Bar Huddle or a Meetup 2 on top of it, plug all the cables in. You can do all that, that's absolutely fine, you can do all that. And again, there's also a bunch of companies out there that do Teams rooms, Zoom rooms or whatever that are all in one. But a lot of times they, to try and save money, they compromise on one or more features. We decided not to compromise on anything. So we stood back, we weren't first. Okay, sue us. So we decided to actually look at what people did well and do it better, and actually look at people weren't doing and do that as well.
I find sometimes that's actually a better approach.
Yeah.
There are other companies outside of the UCC field that are more purist display companies, like NEC, for example. They do that very well. They're not the first to the market, but what they are usually the highest quality and the best integration, and they've had time to think about what they want to release to the marketplace. So you guys are taking a similar approach, which is good.
Yeah. And what will happen is somebody will look at all the things we did and it'll iterate. But actually, iteration is the heart of innovation, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So we wouldn't have done all of these things if other people hadn't done other things. But we actually thought of some things that people would never have thought of. Right. Okay. So let's take you through the Rally Board,
please. Look forward to it.
The clue's in the name. Rally Board 65. It's a 65-inch IR touchscreen. Very responsive. We actually did a shootout between all the different touchscreen technologies, types, sizes, whatever else, from all the different vendors that do them. And there's a very small handful of companies that do those, or the famous ones at least. And this is the one we landed on, and we're actually quite happy with the way we did it. So really good, very responsive. Obviously it's running in Microsoft Teams rooms on Android mode right now.
That's what we'd like to see.
So at launch it'll be Teams rooms or Zoom rooms and probably Google rooms on Android built in. We're also going to go through the certification for Teams rooms on Windows. And on top of that, we're also going to go through the certification for Teams rooms on Windows Touchboard, which is another level of certification. So basically, like Surface Hub, but not Microsoft branded.
So a dual BIOS, dual boot up type of device. You can be in any environment you wish to be so.
Yeah, so on the Windows side, obviously there's no Windows inside the board itself. What we do is, and I'll show you when I flip the board over, sorry, I gave a little clue into one of the things that we can do that nobody else has thought of.
We'll cut that out in edit. I probably won't, but we'll
yeah. So we'll get to that in a second. But before we get to there, what I want to do is just turn the video on. This isn't going to translate into the video, unfortunately. You have to come to the stand to actually see it, or actually talk to your friendly Logitech staff or any number of our partners, and hopefully the music is actually coming across. There's a bunch of speaker vendors over there. But anyway, what you do is speak to anybody that sells Logitech, and hopefully these will be in their demo center or our demo center. The camera itself, I'm going to turn off all the auto framing. The reason I'm going to do that is to show off exactly what this camera can do. So it is actually a brand new camera design. It's our most advanced camera yet. So it's a 4K camera with a 1-inch sensor. And you're thinking, 1 inch, that's not very big. Actually, if you look at a webcam, even a very good webcam, the sensor is about that big.
Yeah, usually sort of like 1/4 inch or less.
Or a 1/4 inch or less, yeah. So a 1-inch sensor, or 1.9 centimeters if you're speaking metric, across Europe, basically all that's doing is letting in as much light as absolutely possible. And the reason that's important is because you want to let in all the light, and because it's only a digital camera, it doesn't use any optical framing. What you can see hopefully on the video is that my video there is showing my age. Not that I really want it to, but it's actually showing a lot of definition.
This clarity of image is coming from purely a digital camera.
Purely a digital camera, but actually the party piece is, look at this guy back here.
In the distance, right?
So
that's a good test of digital cameras as to whether they can handle that.
If you knew him,
field.
You would recognize him and you'd say, hey, that's Tony. Sorry, Tony, or Brad, or whatever your name is. You can also read the writing. You probably can't because we're actually going through an iPhone, but you can read the writing on a lot of these boards. And the clarity is the same on even all these objects in space inside of our stand. The border of our stand is probably, I would say, 10 or 11 meters away from me.
Yep.
Yeah,
I'll confirm that. It's around about that, maybe even more.
And these two guys over here having a lovely conversation are probably 25, 30 meters away.
At least.
Yeah.
At
So
least.
we're basically doing lossless digital zoom up to, I would say, probably 7 meters. And then beyond that, it's still very good video quality. It's not aimed at a room this size. It's aimed at a kind of a medium-sized room, 10, 12, 14 people, you know, and trying to use that kind of capability. The microphone array, I'll talk about the microphone array really quickly, is the same microphone array as the Rally Bar, Mini, Huddle, and Meetup 2. It's actually rated for about 7 meters. That's the kind of the limit that we say before you start adding mic pods and things like that.
So that's really a small boardroom, large meeting room, medium meeting room space to
23 feet, something like that, 7 meters. That's a reasonable size
amount
room.
of space, though,
before you start adding mic pods and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But so the fact that we've got a camera that can actually digitally zoom to the limits of its microphone capability, or just short of its microphone capability, from being honest, is a real testament to the camera design that actually went into it. The other thing to think about is, if you've seen a Rally camera or a Rally Bar, it's got hybrid zoom, so which is 5 times optical and 3 times digital. So we can optically zoom 5 times and then digitally zoom the rest of the way. This will actually perform as well as an optical, like a hybrid camera, zoomed into its 7 meter max. Obviously, optical zoom, you can get much further, but the fact that we can do everything we say we could do on this camera array is fantastic. So I wanted to kind of go on about that. It's really important to kind of articulate that.
Yeah.
The next thing is you might notice these 2 other sensors behind over here. So there's a camera
it's
and a
possible
depth
they might
sensor.
be able to pick that up on the camera particularly, but
maybe you've got some B-roll. You can kind of focus on the lens or something like that. Insert B-roll here. So this is actually a depth sensor, and the reason we do that is, I'll get on to the full reason, but basically, if you know the Collab OS, the Rally Bars and things like that, we have a feature called camera zones. With camera zones, think about a boardroom with a glass wall. And we have these framing modes that we call right sight 2. So we got group framing, speaker tracking, and a composite view, which is what we call grid view. And that kind of translates onto Teams framing modes. And what you want to do is, when you're using the microphones to track somebody and the actual optics to track somebody, you want to track people who are important, people in the room.
Of course.
You don't want to track the person that's walking up and down the corridor, right? So what we do is we set a camera zone, bring the border of that room to the inside of the glass. So if the guy's standing outside like this looking in, or people are outside having a conversation about their weekend, they're not being automatically tracked by the meeting camera, and you're only tracking the people in there. So that's camera zones. We've had it for a very long time. If you haven't configured it, go configure it. If you've got it in an open space, or you've got that kind of challenge that I'm talking about. What we can also do on the Rally board specifically is what we call mic zones. So because we've got the 6 beamforming mics, beamforming is kind of in a clue, what we also use is the depth sensor to actually map the objects in space.
So the depth sensor, IR depth sensor, measuring space.
It is actually figuring out, through echolocation, if you want to call it, basically think about how a bat finds its prey, sends out some sound, waits for the sound to come back, it changes its flight pattern to catch that tiny little insect in the dark. So we're actually mapping the objects, the physical objects in space. What we used to do is actually measure the size of somebody's head and say if a head is this size relative to where the camera is in space, you're approximately this far away. And we can get a pretty reasonable kind of assumption.
But that's not perfect, is it? People have different
size heads and a bunch of other stuff. With this, because we're actually seeing the objects in space, we're actually creating a digital map that you'll never see, but it's actually there and it knows where people are. So what we can do is I can focus the beams of that microphone on the people inside of that space. What we can also do is reject the noise outside of that space. We've got 2 additional microphones on the back of the board that will actually ignore people and actually denoise people behind
So it's picking up what's behind as well as the front, obviously prioritizing.
So think about
the
active
audience in
noise
front.
cancelling headset has active noise cancelling microphones that will listen to the ambient environment and then actually take that out. So that's kind of what we're doing here.
So Randy, you know what I'm about to ask. When do we get to the party trick?
Yeah, so there's one more thing, and just one more.
It's going to make us wait just a little bit longer. I love
So the depth sensor as well, what it does is it actually will background blur everybody outside of your camera zone. So we're actually doing it in hardware. We're not using Zoom or Teams or anything like that to do a background blur that if you move, you can see the background behind you, or if your hair changes or whatever. We're actually doing it in hardware. Outside, everything outside of that camera zone is being blurred.
Actually, one thing I noticed when you changed the cameras or you're playing with the options there, and before you went full screen, the preview window, and when you went full screen, I did notice that we're under an incredible amount of LED lights, and as anybody who's ever tried to record in LED lights will understand, the frequencies are not the best friend of any video camera. And you do get that flicker, you get that refresh flicker. And I noticed that initially when it came on, but it quickly processed that, and it quickly dealt with that to make a nice smooth image. So there's a lot of processing going on in the background here, which is really clear to see, which is obviously where you're getting the quality and clarity from.
Before I get to its party piece, I'm going to talk about the speakers. There's 2 woofers, 2 tweeters, some additional tweeters on the back to help with reflex against walls and open spaces and a bunch of other stuff. But there's also radar sensor here. So rather than using a PIR sensor, we're using radar to detect movement in front of it. And we're doing that for a number of reasons. One is if you want to have a board, they obviously consume a lot of electricity. And I mean a lot of electricity. If you kind of put a meter on there, it's using a ton. Not necessarily this one, but a lot of them will do. What we can do is if nobody's in the room and we can't detect anybody in the room, we can actually put the board into an ultra deep sleep mode. Where it's using almost nothing. And then if you walk into the room, it's likely you're going to use the technology. So we'll give it a little warm up and it'll kind of be ready to go for when you want it. It wakes up. Yeah.
Perfect.
And one more is there's also a bunch of sensors over here from our other product that we announced recently. It's called Spot. So Spot is an in-room kind of sensor that does the radar. Then you can configure the border and the boundary and everything else to pick it up, to put it in any space. But it also has environmental sensors. So it measures things like the oxygen, the carbon dioxide, the temperature, and all the particulate matter. So these things that are really harmful, that are kind of 2.5 microns that get into your bloodstream, we're actually measuring the room health.
That's pretty important because that was what was promised right at the start of all this journey with UCC and UCC devices in particular. There was all these third-party peripheral devices that would try to connect into the room, and it's been an underlying subject matter for a long time. But for you guys to actually bring that in and consume it within the ecosystem, it's
the fact that we
right?
built a board and we built a great camera system and obviously we got the great audio. We just thought as we were developing Spot at the same time, somebody just had the bright idea, well, why don't we just put a Spot inside of there? We got room.
Why not?
And we did, so why not? And now, the party piece.
Drum roll, please. I think we need a drummer somewhere.
So I'm going to explain it really quickly, really quickly. So camera above, you want the camera above when you're drawing on a whiteboard. That's for obvious reasons. I don't need to be crass and kind of say why. But so you don't want the camera below. But if you want a meeting room, you want to deploy this in a meeting room, you want the camera to be eye-line, which means camera below. The last thing you want is me sitting down and a camera looking at the top of my head. You notice the shine? So what we can do
I'll move out the way for this.
Is you pull a little thing, you pull it, you lift it, you let it go, and it has a soft close mechanism that
you don't
turns
have to be worried about letting it slam or anything like that?
No, nothing like that.
How heavy is it to lift?
Not very heavy at all. It's
Is there an actual weight rating at all that you can tell us, or is it?
I don't know. I haven't got any scales in my fingers, but it actually is very light. One pinky finger, and they actually lift it.
So really, it's a very accessible product. Anybody
It's a very accessible product. Yeah. So the back side of the board isn't particularly exciting, but there's a couple of things that I can show you. So we've actually got some ports here for accessories. So one is a cable hanger. So we can do single cable BYOD, just like we can with our Meetup 2. So a 5 meter active cable. You can deploy the Logitech Extend if you need more than 5 meters. You can actually Visa mount the Extend box or the Windows box. So if you've got a Windows PC for your MTR, you actually Visa mount it on the back, put your cables through these little accessible ports, and run everything through there. If you want to do it as a flippy thing, you want to make sure it goes through all the cable management, And I know we've been recording for a while. Don't necessarily want to go through the cable management. Maybe some B-roll.
That's for another time. Maybe.
Another time or something like that.
There's a lot to consume in this product, isn't there?
Yeah. And I think I've kind of maxed out on things, but there's probably also always other things that I could talk about. Obviously, we made a trolley. The trolley will actually make it do the flip thing, but it also has standard Visa mount points. So 400 by 400 Visa pattern. So buy a cart or a wall mount from any recognized vendor. Many of them are here, and wall mount it. You can mount it on its feet on a credenza. Use our trolley. Use somebody else's trolley, or whatever else. And then just one more. About the installation process. We actually thought about how you would be installing this.
Yeah.
And what I mean is, if you've ever bought a big screen TV, you know you have these little plugs, these little plastic things on the box, and you lift this giant lid off and you put it over to the side. And if you want to wall mount it, typically what happens is you take the polystyrene and all the packaging off and you put it on the floor so it's safe and you can put your Visa things on, and then you put it on the wall. We've actually done it so you can do all this in the box. So again, we pull these plugs out, you lift the box off, and you actually have some perforations in the base cardboard that it's sitting in. You fold that down and you can get access to every screw on the back.
Amazing.
You slot the legs in if you want to credenza mount it, put the screws in, get 2 people, it weighs 50 kilos, put it on your credenza, power, network, out of the box experience, either in person or remotely through remote UI. Or if you want to Visa mount it, the same sort of thing, or put it on the cart. It takes about 20 minutes to assemble the cart. So you could basically take it out of the box, go into Teams mode, all within probably an hour.
That's incredible. That is a hell of an experience, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
Nobody's really thought that through the out-of-box experience. And to be honest, Randy, there's so much more that can be said about the rally board. It's something that I think we've been waiting for, and I love the way that the camera rotates. We didn't get to see that, obviously, because we're not doing both sides. But I thoroughly encourage you. There is one more day left at ISE. Get down here if you can. This is going up on Thursday evening. Friday, Logitech will still be here. The rally board will still be here. It is a very, very busy booth. It's taken me 4 days to have this time with Randy as it is. You can appreciate a launch like this and a product like this that's just so groundbreaking and packs innovation is always going to be busy. So get down here for Friday if you can. If you're around in the area, or if you're making your way into the area, thinking of making your way into the area, it is well worth a visit. So come along, ISE 2025. They are in Hall. What hall are we in, actually? I've lost track.
We're in Hall 2. We're literally second in the door.
There we are, so you can't miss it. Literally come through the door, they're right here. So Randy, thank you very much, I really appreciate it.
No problem.
That's fantastic. Hope you have a very good end of the show. I'm flying back tomorrow, so I won't get to see how much more success this gets, but hopefully you'll be able to join Randy and the Logitech crew on their stand.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.